everybody. I'm here for Bean of the Week, and today we're making the delicious and beautiful cassoulet bean, which is a big white bean. It's a white runner bean, and I wish you could smell the beans and taste them. This is what they look like. They're kind of a big bean. See if I can get a close-up picture of one. They're a light colored bean, they're a white bean, but they're large and they're very creamy. So if you could taste one, the skin is creamy. Doesn't have any toughness to the skin. And when you bite into it, the creamy inside of the bean is very, forward. It's a creamy bean. That's how you would describe it. Hi, Cindy. Hi, Dion. Pam Vilnovsky. Hi, everybody. So this is Bean of the Week. And the cassoulet bean, I have this really great book. It's called The Heirloom Bean Guide. I ordered it from Rancho Gordo because I'm on their bean club. So I get all these different beans. And what I really like about this book is it goes through each type of bean and it tells you what the bean is, where it came from. And the cassoulet bean, also known as the tarbais bean, is very expensive. It's from France. And in France, the true tarbais beans can cost as much as $35 a pound. Can you imagine? Now, these are not the exact same bean, but they actually came from that same seed from France. So we're having these beans that could cost as much as $35 a pound some places. But we get them from Rancho Gordo for $5.95 a pound. The only thing is, they're not easy to get. They're kind of scarce sometimes. So, even though they sometimes have them available, I think they sell out really fast because they're so good. They're just really creamy and delicious. So what we're gonna do with them is we're gonna make our own version of a cassoulet type of a dish. It's not really a cassoulet. We're gonna make it in a baking dish that looks like this. I think this is a 10-inch baking dish. Isn't it pretty? Can you see that it matches my bean pot and my skillet? Because my husband, who spoils me, got it for me as a gift. So I can make things like this. How cool is that? So today I'm cooking with Taro. Taro, hi buddy, is in the room. And where's Mochi? Mochi's in here too. We've got to say hi to Mochi. Mochi, say hello. Oh, he's just gonna sleep. They like beans. They'll eat anything. They're dogs. They'll eat beans, they'll eat bread. What they've really been enjoying is the bread, because I have this, some bread. I'm gonna make some breadcrumbs. Oh, hi Tammy, thank you. Tammy gave me 50 stars. Stars are enabled, so if you feel like giving stars to me, they're translated into, I think each star is a penny, so, Facebook eventually will pay. I have some bread. First thing I'm gonna do is make some breadcrumbs. But I wanted to show you the beautiful ingredients for this dish are zucchini, and you could use yellow squash, but when I went to Whole Foods, the yellow squash looked awful. It was just kind of bruised up because I'm always getting organic, and it just looked old. And then I have some nice tomatoes. It's a kind of a firm hothouse tomato, but firm so that I could slice it really thin. I have a lemon. I'm gonna use a little lemon zest. And some frozen corn that I've defrosted. And those are the ingredients, along with my bread for breadcrumbs. And then I have some fresh basil that I just washed. So this basil I bought at the store because I'm past the season for basil growing in my garden. So I had to buy basil. I hate to do that. And let me adjust my camera here. Then the other ingredient is the beans. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I made the beans so that you'll have an idea about that. And I'll probably start there, but first I'm going to get my bread out. I think I'm going to use 2 pieces. I think that will fill up my 1 cup of breadcrumbs. And I got this bread I like this bread because it's very plain. It doesn't have any seeds or any little bits of nuts like my Dave's bread. And this Heartland Bread Company does not add any oil to their bread. Believe it or not, it's really hard to find bread that doesn't have oil in it. It just has the flour, sugar, salt, and yeast. So great, hard to find. And I'm gonna cut it up, but I'm gonna tell you how I cook the beans while I'm cutting up the bread. You could also just tear it. Let's tear it. We don't have to cut it up. So I'm gonna talk and tear my bread at the same time. See my little measuring cup here. And I'm just gonna tear it into kind of, you know, smallish pieces. So I made the beans earlier today. My process for making beans is I get up early. So at about 5:30 this morning, I soak the beans in a big bowl and with plenty of water. I use filtered water because the tap water doesn't always taste that great. And then I kept him in that water for about 6 hours. So at 11 o'clock, I made the beans. And I put the beans in my pot here and then covered them with plenty of filtered water again. So this 1 cup, I really didn't need 2 pieces of bread because look how much bread I have left. This bread is really good though. You know, if I wasn't making this video, I could just eat this bread, but I'm not going to. I'll probably use most of it. I'll save it and feed it to the birds right outside here. So anyway, I've got my cup of breadcrumbs. I'm gonna sprinkle these on at the end, and I don't want them to be breadcrumbs that you did in the food processor. I know you can take the food processor and use it for breadcrumbs. I've certainly done that many times, but I don't want to do that today. I'm using the kind of big coarse breadcrumbs. So then I put my beans, I'll let you see my beans while I'm talking about them. So with the beans, I put them in this pot this morning after I'd soaked them for about 5 hours. And I covered them with water, brought them to a boil, let them boil for 20 minutes. And while the beans are starting to boil, what I'm doing at the same time is I'm cooking some other things. So I have a skillet, some kind of you know, large skillet with a big cooking surface, like a 12-inch skillet. And I put the skillet on medium-high heat, and that's where I put maybe 1/4 of a large onion, a carrot that I've cut into small dice, and some celery. And I get that in here because there's a lot of cooking surface, and that will, you know, saute the vegetables. Put in a couple of garlic cloves. I have a bunch of garlic left from my Korean plant-based cooking class, so I used a couple of these garlic cloves. And I like to develop flavor in the vegetables by letting them kind of get lightly browned in the big skillet. And they won't get as brown in my little pan because there's not as much surface area. So that's why I use the skillet. And then I take them from the skillet as soon as they've cooked for about 5 minutes and they start to caramelize and develop some color and they've softened. Then I add them to my cooking beans. And then I bring the beans to a boil, let them boil for 20 minutes. And then turn it to a simmer and let the beans simmer until they're done. And that's the whole thing with the Rancho Gordo beans. There is no magic formula. You know, how do I know the beans are done? You know, I go and check them and take a bite, and if I can still taste the skin and it's kind of hard, then I know they're not done. And at some point, I taste the skin and it's soft. And I know then that the beans are done because I bite into them and there's no kind of like the hard skin texture. It's gone. So I know the beans are done. You should not have a ton of liquid in your beans or you're not going to develop a bean broth. I see Tina, Christine, Anna. Thank you guys for attending. So anyway, I see, I can't remember what I was going to say. Oh, you don't want to put too much water in the beans because you want to develop this really rich broth. So in this instance, I don't really have a lot of bean broth in my beans. I only made 8 ounces for 2 also, so it's not a huge pot because I'm making this one casserole dish of this dish and I don't really want to have a lot of it just because, you know, I don't know that my husband will eat this. He might, but he doesn't always like things made with beans, believe it or not. I'm like the queen of the beans. I'm looking out here because all of a sudden a million birds came over here. I'll show you. You know, even though my husband lives here with the the bean lady. See all these birds? They're like a million little sparrows showed up, and I just kind of got distracted when I saw them. So even though my house is full of wonderful whole food, plant-based food, my husband is not always my biggest fan, but I make it anyway because I like it. So I only made 8 ounces of beans because I didn't want to have a whole pound. I like them fresh better than frozen, so I would prefer to make a pot of beans more often than make a big pot and then have to freeze a bunch of them. Although I'll freeze a small amount, I don't want to have to freeze a lot. Les says, too much water in my beans, do I just pour some off? No, if you have too much water in your beans, reduce the liquid by turning the beans on your stove and bring it to a kind of a high simmer and just let it cook, and some of that liquid will evaporate and then you'll have a richer bean broth. So as my beans are getting to the point where I can tell they're cooked, what I do is I add the salt then. And I don't add a lot of salt. Let's see, Carolyn Nichols says, the birds heard you talking about the breadcrumbs. Yeah, maybe they did. See, they know I have these 2 little crusts of bread to throw out there. Who will get the bread are the squirrels. You know, they get everything. So anyway, don't put too much water in your beans, but you have to have enough. So the water will cook down, and then what you should do is, as the water cooks down, then you're supposed to use boiling water. And I didn't bring my kettle in here, I usually do, but I have like a boiling water kettle that I keep next to the stove. It's one of those electric ones, and I keep it hot while I'm cooking the beans. That way, you know, I can just pour the boiling water directly into the beans. If you don't do that, what happens is if you were to pour cold water into your hot simmering beans, then, you know, what could happen is it brings the temperature of the cooking water down. Then it takes time to bring it back up. So that's kind of a waste of effort. I'm going to set this kind of off to the side so I can put my casserole dish right here. And we're just going to start layering the ingredients for our little casserole here. Now, oops, I'm about to lose my knife here. I'm trying to get myself in here and the other stuff, and it's a little bit of a, there we go. I can be in here, or my thing can be in here. It's hard to get all of it, but we'll get it. Okay, so I've got a tomato, and I'm going to cut this tomato and layer it in the casserole dish. So if you're cooking along with me, get your tomato, and I'm taking the little stem out with my knife. So probably should use a smaller knife than this, but you get the point. I don't want to cut it off. I just want to take this little, like the stem of the tomato out, so that I can slice the tomato and not waste a bunch of it. So I'm going to slice it really kind of thin. All right, you can kind of see how thin these pieces are. They're this thin. Well, here, let me wait until I get one that doesn't have a big hole in it so you can see. So they're kind of like that thin, and I'm just going to lay them across the bottom of my casserole dish. Here's my casserole dish. I'm just laying the tomatoes on the bottom of the casserole dish, and I'll show it to you before I'm done. My knife is really sharp. It's a Miyabi 8-inch chef's knife, and it's razor sharp, and I sharpen it all the time. Also, I hone my knife, so you don't have to see how thin those pieces are. The true test of a sharp knife is if it cuts through the skin of your tomato without stopping. If your knife is too dull to cut a tomato, that means it's a dull knife and you need to go take it somewhere and get it sharpened or learn how to sharpen it. We have a place in Fort Worth called House of Blades where you can take your knife to be sharpened, which is pretty nice. I'm just going to have 1 layer of tomatoes because I'm only going to use 1 tomato. But if you wanted to have more than 1 layer of tomatoes, there's an option to add cherry tomatoes. And I didn't want to use cherry tomatoes in this because, to me, I think they have a lot of skin, and I'm not crazy about that, but I give you the option. I think in the recipe I said some cherry tomatoes. So if you've got those, you can use those. Or you can use another sliced tomato when we make our layers. But like I said, I'm only putting 1 layer of tomatoes, just because that's my taste bud, is to have less of a tomato flavor. I guess I'm one of those low acidic people I'm not as crazy about acid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a layer of tomatoes, a layer of zucchini, a layer of corn, some, let's see, let me look at my recipe real quick. I'm going to put some garlic on here. Let's see, layer of squash. Oh, okay, minced garlic and lemon zest. This recipe was a Rancho Gordo recipe, but I had to modify the heck out of it because like all their recipes, it's very meat forward. So I had to play around with it and take a bunch of stuff out of it. And I've never made it before because on Bean of the Week, I always make things I haven't made before. That's the whole point. I have my cut resistant glove on, which is good to wear when you're dealing with a mandoline. And I'm taking my zucchini. I cut the end off. And my mandoline is a Progressives mandoline, Progressives brand. It's in my Amazon store, so if you follow me, I have an Amazon store, and I do get paid a little bit from qualifying purchases. It's not a lot. Like, I don't think I've ever gotten more than $20, $25 in a month, but you know, it's still something. I will put the link to my Amazon store in the comments. So what I do is I take the zucchini, and I'll show you how thin it is, and I'll tell you what setting it's on. It's not thin enough for me, so I'll show you. See, it's about this thin, and it was on setting about 1.5, so I'm going to try to move it to 1 to see if I can get it to be thinner. Sometimes 1 is too thin, and you can't really slice things. So we'll see if this works. Yeah, it's working. Okay, so this is what I want. 1 was a lot thinner. See how thin that is compared to 1.5 was too thick. So there's a difference between 1 is with my gloved hand and 1.5 is with my non-gloved hand. So I want it to be the really super thin. And that's the beauty of the mandoline, because it would take a long time to, you know, manually cut this zucchini or yellow squash or whatever you're using and get it to be this thin. It would just take a long time. So, you know, that's why the mandoline comes in really handy. You should use your guard. It comes with a guard. I'm not using the guard because I'm going to quit before it gets down to that end, and I'll use this for something else. So I didn't use the guard. Don't hate me, but that's what I usually do. I try not to get too close to the end. All right, so see, I have this big pile of zucchini. I'm going to just layer it over the tomatoes. And just kind of a, you know, it's not in any kind of design. It's just on here, like this. And this is more of a summery dish if you think about it. You know, the zucchini, tomatoes, and corn, those are kind of summery things. But when you're whole food plant-based and you eat a lot of vegetables, to me, if the vegetables available in the store readily, I don't care if it's summer or fall or winter, because it's still going to taste good. And I'm going to put some corn, not all of it. I'm just going to sprinkle about 1/3 of the corn on it. You know, I like the vegetables, whatever they are, and you can always find zucchini where I live. Zucchini is seems like a common vegetable, never hard to get. So I've got to put a couple of cloves of garlic and chop them up really fine. And then we'll put a layer of beans, and then we'll put some garlic on that. The beans already have some garlic, but I'm going to put a layer of my beans on here, and you need about 3 cups of beans. Okay, so if you cook 8 ounces of beans like I did, you should have about 3 cups. And I'm not using a lot of the bean broth. I'm using a slotted spoon, but I will put some of the bean broth on top at the end. Not a lot, because we don't want it to be mushy. In fact, I'm going to turn my oven on. And I'm going to turn my air conditioner off because I can hear it kind of buzzing. Sorry about that. I usually turn that off before the class starts, but I didn't because it's kind of loud. All right, so I'm going to chop up this garlic really small. I'm slicing it. And then I'm going to chop it. And no, I'm not going to use a garlic press. You don't use a garlic press. I find that it just mushes the garlic up, and then, you know, you lose some of the garlic juice, so I tend to just chop garlic with my knife. But if you want to use whatever tool you have, I know some of you have a whole supply of all kinds of handy tools that chop and dice and do stuff, but truthfully, the way that, you know, the easiest way to cook is to just get stuff out and start cooking, and don't worry about all the little tools and things unless you have to use them. Like some things you have to use a tool. I don't like the sound this cutting board is making, I'm sorry. I'm trying to mince the garlic up kind of small, and I've got a little table here and my cutting board is making noise. All right, so that's good enough. I'm gonna sprinkle some garlic on here. It's pretty finely minced. And then I have a lemon, and my lemon has been washed. So be sure and wash your lemon when you do this. You don't want to use a dirty lemon. It helps when you get the sticky label off. I see a bunch of people on here, Wendy, Sandy, Bickham. So I'm just going to put a little layer of lemon zest. And we only want to get the layer of the lemon zest on the very outside. We don't want to get the white part, because if you start getting down to the white part, it starts getting kind of bitter. So that's why you just go around and around and around your lemon so that you don't get the bitter part. And then we're going to use some freshly ground pepper. This pepper grinder was a gift from my son for my birthday. He was very pleased with himself, so he told me, he said, "Mom, use this in your videos." So, you know, I always try to use it. Okay, let's see, I think I'm gonna put, I'll put the basil on at the very end, but I'm gonna move it over here so I don't forget it. I'm gonna move it onto my cutting board. I'm just gonna put it on at the very end. All right, so I've got my first layer of, remember I started out with tomatoes, I added the really super thinly sliced zucchini, then I added a little bit of corn, some garlic, lemon zest, or some, I added the beans, and then the garlic and the lemon zest, and some freshly ground pepper. I'm making my garlic a little bit smaller, just because I don't want anyone to bite into a big chunk of garlic. You know, the combination of white beans and lemon is really good. I see that in a lot of recipes. Oh, and preheat your oven to 350 degrees for this dish. All right, so then we're gonna put these really thin, and remember, the reason I'm doing the zucchini really thin is it's only gonna be in here for 30 minutes. And so I don't wanna have great big chunks of zucchini, and then they're gonna be like raw and at the end, and then that's not gonna be very appetizing, raw zucchini with your cooked beans. So cut your zucchini extra, extra thin. And now if you still had tomatoes, and you wanted to put more tomatoes in here, go ahead and put another layer of tomatoes, but I only wanted to have one layer of tomatoes. Then I'm gonna put about a third more of my corn. And my corn was frozen this morning, but it's just been sitting here out for a couple hours defrosting, which is fine for me. So I put a layer of my corn here in the dish. I'm gonna put another layer of beans. So I'm gonna have 3 layers of beans in all. So it's like 3 cups of the beans are going to be layered in my casserole. I think this is going to be so delicious. Can't wait to eat it. Because I know it's going to be delicious because I sampled the beans, and the beans, just eating the beans with nothing else was so delicious that I didn't even really need to eat anything. I could have just eaten this whole thing of beans and been completely happy. So if your beans taste really good, that's the key to having a good dish. And that's why I always harp on everybody about using the Rancho Gordo beans or some really, I forgot my pepper. I'm not putting salt on it because we don't really need salt. We are just using pepper. I still have some more zucchini. So I'm putting the last of my zucchini slices on here. Okay, and then I have a little bit more corn. So, you know, if your beans taste good, your dish is going to taste good. But if your beans are undercooked or cooked to death, then your dish isn't going to taste as good. So what about why can't you just open a can of beans and use canned beans? You could, you know, if you didn't have access to the delicious cassoulet beans. Oh, and you could also use any of the white beans. So you could use the Ayocote Blanco, you could use the cannellini beans, Royal Corona beans, Flageolet beans. We use those before. They look like they're kind of green and they're smaller, but they taste really good. Ayocote Blanco, we made something with those recently. You can use any of the white beans. Let's see if there's a question. No. Hi, Julie Denton. So you could use any of the beans. And so this is the last of my beans. But I'm telling you right now that if you use the Rancho Gordo beans, order them online, do whatever you have to do, they are going to be the best. Now I want to show you all I have left. I'm going to pour on here. Well, no, I think I'll pour it once I get the breadcrumbs on. I don't have very much left of this bean broth because I intentionally reduced my bean broth till it was really thick. At the end, after I added salt, I added about a teaspoon of salt to my beans, and then I let them cook until the bean broth was almost gone. Now, there's still some in there, but not much. And why did I do that? It's because, I'll put this here so you can see it. By reducing the bean broth, it concentrated the flavors. These beans make a really good tasting broth. And if there's too much liquid, they're not going to develop a good tasting broth. It's just like if you made soup and you put a bunch of water in your soup is going to just taste watery. But if you cook your soup and it develops this really nice soup broth or soup stock, it tastes better. Well, the same thing with this kind of beans is by cooking the beans until you reduce the stock, it's a lot richer. It tastes, you know, like a sauce almost. Okay, so I've got everything in here. Now I'm going to put my breadcrumbs in here. So you see, remember in the very beginning, in case you joined late, I have this beautiful loaf of Heartland bread that has no added oil, okay? It doesn't have any oil. It just has yeast, flour, salt, and no oil, which is hard to find. I got it at Whole Foods. Heartland Bread Company. They're a Texas company. I don't know if they ship, but that's where I always get them. And I just busted up the bread into crumbs. I didn't cut them. I just kind of tore them with my hands. And I have about a cup. I'm gonna sneeze. Nope, I didn't sneeze. Thought I was going to, so I wanted to move away from the food. Heaven forbid that you sneeze on your food. Okay, so I covered it with breadcrumbs. Now, the normal thing that people do with breadcrumb covered things is they put butter, you know, like they make like a buttery thing for the breadcrumbs. But since we don't use butter, I'm gonna put the last of my stock to moisten the breadcrumbs just a little bit. So that's what I did with and it wasn't a lot of stock. So if you have a lot of stock, don't, you know, saturate your breadcrumbs with stock, just a little bit. Goes a long way. So there I have my delicious cassoulet, kind of, you know, summer vegetable cassoulet, and I have my basil. So let me look at something real quick. Fresh mint. Oh, okay. So I'm just going to take my basil and I just stacked them all up into one stack, and I'm going to roll them up kind of like, so they look like a cigar. So it looks like one roll, kind of like that. All right, that's all my basil. And then I'm going to slice it into little strips. Really thin. Oh, it smells really good, that fresh basil. It's a wonderful smell. All right, so then I've got my nice chiffonade basil. That's what it's called. And I'm just gonna put that over the top of this. It looks really pretty. And it will cook some, so it's not gonna look this pretty bright green when it's done, but it will flavor the food really nicely. All right, so there we go. There's my beautiful cassoulet vegetable style. Now a true cassoulet is not this, okay? A true cassoulet is gonna be something that is very, very hearty, and the typical one that I learned to make many years ago had all kinds of meats in it. It had sausage, chicken, duck, pork, bacon. Oh, it was just like so heavy and dense, full of all these different meats, and then it also had these cassoulet beans. So that was the only similarity between this and the traditional cassoulet. So, you know, we're having to take, since we're eating whole food, plant-based, no oil, we're taking these beautiful white cassoulet beans and turning them into a beautiful dish using fresh vegetables, fresh tomatoes, zucchini, corn, basil, garlic. I have carrots and celery and onions in here that I cook the beans with. So the beans are flavored with carrot, celery, and onion and garlic. So we have, you know, fresh lemon. So we've taken all of these beautiful vegetables that are going to provide us with the antioxidants and the vitamins and all the nutrients that we really need, instead of the, you know, things that promote inflammation, which I won't mention all the names of those things, but you know what I'm talking about. So we'll take the healthy ingredients and make our cassoulet. So I'm going to put this in the oven at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. When it comes out, I'll take a picture of it and post it. I'll also post the rest of the recipe in the comments along with my Amazon store link. And that's it. This was Bean of the Week. If you have a question, I'll watch the comments for a moment. And I'll put this in the oven while I'm watching the comments and set the timer so that it's done in 30 minutes. Oh, my oven's preheated. I'm going to set it for 30 minutes. Okay, so anybody have any questions? I don't see any. Carolyn Nichols says it sounds delicious. Thanks for sharing. Thank you. I did a lot of research trying to find a cassoulet recipe, and every single one I found used oil, lots of it. I'm getting my tea. So I would find a cassoulet recipe and it would look promising, but then it was like, saute this in oil, use the oil and whatever. And it was all just very, very rich. So I kept looking and looking and I never could find one. So the one I found was more of a, you know, use the summer vegetables, but I still think it's good. Melanie said, you said in your list of ingredients to use both a large sliced tomato plus a cup of cherry tomatoes. Okay, Melanie, I covered that a little while ago. Back when we were putting in the sliced tomatoes, the next layer, if we wanted to put tomatoes in the next layer, like we layered tomatoes, zucchini, corn, and beans, then you do another layer of tomatoes, zucchini, corn, and beans, put it in that layer. So put it in the second layer or the third layer, it doesn't matter. I would probably cut the cherry tomatoes in half. Les Swanson said, it's in the oven. I ground my bread into crumbs before class. Oh, that's okay. You know, as I said earlier on, in this one, I just took the bread and broke it into a little bit larger crumbs. But, you know, that doesn't make that much difference. You know, whether the bread is in large crumbs or small crumbs, that's not going to make any difference, really. Okay, Rachel Detroit says, cool, thanks for teaching us about different beans that you can use to get our fiber in. Also, great shirt. Oh, thank you. Anyone know what's on my shirt? Can you tell what it is? They're little Boston, or no, what are they called? I guess they're Boston Terriers. Anyway, or no, they're bulldogs. Sorry, they're English bulldogs. So my daughter, when I got this shirt, she wanted it. She said, oh, I want that shirt, Mom. But I wouldn't give it to her because I liked it. I got it at Anthropology a million years ago, but I like dog stuff. So, you know, I used to have a boxer doormat at my door here, and everybody would comment on it. Well, I washed it and it fell apart. So I've been looking for a boxer doormat ever since. Okay, so anybody else? No other questions? Then I'm going to sign off and go back to my computer and finish the recipe. So you guys let me know what happens. Post a picture of your bean casserole and let's see how they taste. I've had such good luck with the white beans. I came home last night and I didn't have anything made to eat, and I didn't want to eat another Korean noodle dinner. So I looked in my freezer and I found some soup, and it was white beans and green soup with lemon. So kind of similar flavor profile as this, but I didn't care. I took it out, I put it in the microwave, and then I heated it up, and I had the most delicious frozen, but once it was reheated, it was good. It was a creamy bean, green, lemony soup. It was delicious. So, you know, these things are good recipes. Now with this one, if you wanted to add greens to it as well, like let's say that at the end you thought this would be good with greens, I would serve it with some blanched greens on the side. I wouldn't put the greens in it because we have enough things that we make with greens in it. But you could put it on top of some greens and let the greens wilt it, or you could blanch the greens, squeeze out some of the liquid, and then use your blanched greens next to the casserole. It does have bread on it, so it doesn't have a lot of bread on it. So with this one, I probably wouldn't eat it with a grain, but you could. I saw some recipes where they took this kind of cassoulet type of dish and they ate it with polenta. Well, Trader Joe's and other places sell tubes of polenta that don't have any oil in them. So you can buy these tubes of polenta, which is just like grits, and you can just slice them into pieces and warm them up in the air fryer. And so it's kind of like having a block of grits. So I think if you took those polenta rounds and put them on the side with this bean casserole, cassoulet beans, it would be delicious. Also, a serving of brown rice would be good. So think about that, and always a salad on the side. So I hope you make this. I know some of you are making it. I'm sure Melanie Drescher's making it. And she's using the cherry tomatoes too, which I didn't use in mine. But I'm sure it's going to be good. So let me know how yours turns out, and thank you all for watching. I'm going to get to the computer and write up the rest of the recipe. So bye-bye for now. I'll see you next week. Bean of the week is every Monday at 2 o'clock. I don't know which beans I'm making yet, but I'll be making something good with my supply. I've got so many different beans. If you have a bean in your bean supply and you want me to cook it, leave it in the comments, because that's a lot of times where I get ideas, is someone will say, I've got such and such a bean and I don't know what to make with it. So leave the name of your bean in the comments and I'll put it on my list of bean of the week recipes. So bye. And the boxers are so excited that they both fell asleep. So, you know, they're pretty useless. There's taro and mochi. You know, even the smell of food didn't wake them up. So I guess they're just content. They've been outside. So bye everybody, and I'll see you soon on either Friday recap or Bean of the Week or at a class. So thanks everyone for all you do and for following me, and for the stars. If you gave me stars, I appreciate it. Bye-bye.